After banning wheat exports in May, the government has now prohibited exports of wheat flour, maida, semolina and wholemeal atta 2 days ago in a bid to curb rising prices. Remember, all of these products had become very popular for exports after the ban on wheat exports in the month of May. Furthermore, India is also likely to restrict some exports as domestic supply is under threat of broken rice. There are reports that the government is now looking at possible restrictions of broken rice exports, which account for almost 20% of India's shipment abroad. What is going to be the impact of this is the question. And what is the context of this, considering that government program which gives free food grains to about 80 crore Indians that started in COVID-19 ends in the month of September. There are reports that it could be extended as well. To speak more on this, I'm joined now by Siraj Hussain as well as Jayant Dasgupta. Siraj Hussain is former Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. He's also co-promoter of Arcus policy research. And Jayant Dasgupta is former ambassador and former representative of India at the WTO. Welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us on the India Development Debate. What is our current status in terms of food security in your view?
The food security of Indians is perfectly fine. I do not think there is any significant threat to that. Having said this, it is also true that 2 or 3 very large rice producing states like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar and West Bengal have seen shortfall in rains, particularly UP, which is a very large producer of rice. So even though we do not know the full impact of loss of production due to shortfall in rains, but the media reports, and some of them have visited several districts, for example, Jayant and Bera of Print visited Hardoi and Barabanki districts of UP, and these reports suggest that the production loss may be about 10%. Some other media reports suggest that production loss may be as high as 15%. So this is the trigger due to which some people feel that government may restrict the export of rice.
Now, just to get your perspective on what we've done with wheat, the wheat exports ban began in May. Now, there's some derivatives that we have banned as well, semolina, wheat flour, maida, etc. What is the impact of this on a global scale, considering that, exports are still hampered from Russia and Ukraine?
See, now export of wheat from Ukraine has started. Many ships have already gone to African countries and some Asian countries. So the supplies are not as restricted as they were a couple of months back. The global prices have also fallen. However, having said this, and I have written this, that the government policy on food processing is stated that government will encourage the export of processed food. Therefore, I think the ban on semolina or maida or wholemeal atta is ill-conceived. In fact, we should be promoting the export of processed food rather than unprocessed raw wheat. So I do not know what is prompting the government, because the latest estimate of wheat production says that it is in the range of about 107, 108 million tons. So if that estimate of government is correct, I cannot quite understand why this ban on semolina and wheat atta, etc. has come.
Jayant Dasgupta, I talked about food protectionism in my introduction, and this is a phenomenon we're seeing the world over. And not just in India. I don't know if you can go as far as to say if India is indulging in this. But what is the impact of this on a global scale?
I'll take up rice and wheat separately. As far as wheat is concerned, India started exporting only in the past few years. And its exports were around 4 million tons only. About 30% of the world's exports take place from Ukraine and Russia. So India is a very marginal player. It was, around 2% or less in most years. So by restricting exports of wheat from India, I don't think it has really affected the world markets very much. And now that the Ukrainian wheat has again started moving on ships to Africa and other places, I think the situation has eased considerably as far as supply is concerned. Of course, there is a worldwide spike in prices. As far as rice is concerned, the market is much smaller. It is only about 40 million tons. And India last year exported about 21.2 million tons. So India has become by far the largest exporter of rice. And as far as rice production this year in Kharif is concerned, and mind you, rice is also produced in other seasons in the southern states, in Bengal as well. Only in the northern states it is produced in Kharif, that is harvested in November, early December. So rice production has suffered on account of two reasons. One is that there has been a 13% approximate shortage in shortfall in terms of coverage of because of scanty rainfall. The second point is Punjab and Haryana have suffered from this plant hopper, white stick plant hopper, which is carrying a virus which has also affected the crops in China. So the production in Punjab and Haryana may suffer. But from a peak of about 130 million tons last year, the Agriculture Ministry, I think, and Mr. Siraj Hussain would be better placed to comment on this. I think about a 10% shortfall, about 120 million tons is still expected by way of production in the current year. So that is not really falling very much short of what we produce. And we procured about 60 million tons last year of rice, which was far more than what we needed. So this year, even if it falls a little bit, the procurement, we will be in a safe position. The last point I wanted to mention is this conjecture about broken rice. I don't know where it has emanated from, but India has so much of rice that if it were not to export or put a ban or a partial ban on exports, Indian farmers and the whole industry would suffer. So I don't think that is in the offing or even under contemplation, but there could be certain restrictions put on in a very minor way to keep the prices in control should the prices tend to get out of hand.
There has been some increase in prices of rice and wheat. There are reports that planting has come down. There has been no clear denial yet to these reports that broken rice exports will also be curbed. And as Mr. Siraj Hussain is saying, there might be some moderation. So that's where we stand. But the big question really is, Mr. Hussain, it was very interesting when you commented in your response that you don't think the Pradhan Mantri Anna Yojana scheme will be extended beyond September. Can we be sure? Because in terms of food security, those challenges still remain, even 2 years after COVID, isn't it?
It is true that some people in the organized sector are still earning less than what they were earning in the pre-COVID times, even though we do not have the data on incomes. However, I think the economy is in the recovery mode and a lot of employment has come back as the CMI survey shows. So I do not think the government is going to extend Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana beyond September. If wheat production next year is good and if rice procurement this year is not very much lower than 60 million tons, as Jayant mentioned, then perhaps in the run-up to parliament elections in 2024, we may see a reintroduction of this scheme. Also, please remember that many economists and commentators have been of the view that 80 crore people, need not be given so much of free food grains because after all, the government ended up spending some 3 lakh crores on food subsidy. And now this entire debate, will also consider this into account.
Mr. Dasgupta, your views on whether India will extend this scheme, and is that a factor at all in determining any curbs of exports going ahead?
Only 5.5 million tons has been provided for the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana. And it is really not very substantial, the amount, considering the fact that we spend about, much more on the PDS system and the National Food Security Act, ICDS, PM Poshan, etc. So I don't think this is really going to matter very much. But overall, if we look at this continuation of free food grains for 80 crores, beyond September, then the government will have to look at the financial implications as well. The food grains may be available, but financial implications may be very high. And the government may decide that, in order to, encourage in a way people from, seeking employment once again and, moving out, if they had gone back to their homes and, getting into productive employment, that could be one of the things which could, lead to some easing of this free food grains for 80 crore people in terms of both the numbers as well as the volumes.
That we'll have to see. But I think important point that total volume should not impact beyond a certain point. I think we need to focus for a bit on the global challenge that we're facing. And I'll come to you first on this, Mr. Dasgupta, where there are concerns that a lot of nations around the world may be faced with hunger because of the current geopolitical situation, because of food protectionism that some countries are indulging in. How big a concern is that, and what should India's approach be right now?
Well, India has supported the World Food Programme's procurement of food grains from countries which have not been affected by food scarcity. And India has supported it in the WTO in mid-June in the ministerial conference. So, of course, government-to-government support would be there. India has always been more than forthcoming in providing aid by way of food. But the World Food Programme also has to discharge its own responsibilities as well as other large food-producing countries. So there is overall, I think, in the world, globally, there is no shortage. There could be a shortage in terms of the supply chain management. And of course, because the prices are rising, there could be an issue about affordability by many of the very poor countries. So that is something which the global community has to look at. And India will surely, I think, discharge its full responsibilities and go even slightly beyond. But it's not possible for India to feed the entire, numbers of countries which have a food shortage or are facing food scarcity conditions because of either supply or prices.
And your response to this, are we truly facing a global crisis of food shortage and India's position?
I think several countries in Africa and some countries in Asia are experiencing difficulties in importing food grains because of high prices. And therefore, there is very high price rise in these countries, including in our own neighborhood, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, even Bangladesh. And we have seen Bangladesh entering into contract for import of rice and other food items from various countries. Bangladesh has also gone to IMF. So while availability may continue to be quite okay, the prices are too high for many developing countries and their currencies would have fallen, and therefore they will need much more resources to import. So I think there are several countries in the world which will face food insecurity, and we must also include our own neighborhood, Afghanistan, this list.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jayant Dasgupta and Siraj Hussain, and breaking down what exactly we're seeing right now. We'll wait and see whether there are any curbs or restrictions of any kind on the export of certain kinds of rice. The report right now is on broken rice. And what the impact of these wheat export curbs will be going forward. Thank you once again for joining us.